We're coming in hot to give you our hot takes on all the latest mental health news.
From headlines and memes to developments and breakthroughs.
We go into this show blind with the hopes of learning something new.
Before sharing some bunny hugs.
And leaving with our eyes wide open. I'm Nick.
And I'm Todd. And this is Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
We're glad you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Mental Health Headline Hot Takes. I'm Nick.
I'm Todd.
And we
spinning the wheel.
We spin the wheel on these episodes to see who gets to decide which stories we cover first.
Did you see it?
Yep, it's rigged every week.
I don't want to go first every time.
The guy who makes the wheel spins the wheel gets to go first every time.
Well, this week, so for this episode, it's not an article per se. It's actually a little feedback we got from a listener.
Okay.
So I found it interesting though. And they reached out and said, just listen to your latest podcast. I have to say that the misogyny is unhinged. I hope you'll consider in the future how slurs like pussy, referring to men that need to quote unquote man up, is bad for everyone's mental health, especially women. This is a word just like the N-word, and it's designed to keep women down while making men feel better about themselves because they don't have a vulva. Your use of it in the episode really trashes women for no reason at all. I hope you'll just say coward in the future. Thanks for hearing this. This is from somebody who also reaches out all the time and just says nice things about the episode. So, so the language I used last time was...
I don't even remember that. Was that like when we were mocking man up to young boys?
Yes, when the British government was getting rid of some stuff. And I said, basically they're saying stop being pussies and go to work.
So that was yesterday's episode.
We're recording, but last week. Yeah.
So spoiler alert, we're recording on a Friday.
We ended up chatting for quite a while, her and I, and we had a really great conversation. Her biggest thing was that, because I was like, well, it's hard not to offend people. And she said,
I just went to dinner with friends last night and we had a whole discussion about this.
Not that word?
Not that word. About something else that happened at a speaking event, actually, that my friend was at yesterday at a college, which is where I'm going today at DePaul University. I'm going to be part of a panel discussion about ethics in documentary and reality TV. So it's ironic that this came up, but yeah, go for
Crazy
it.
Universe.
Tell me about your conversation.
Her biggest thing, she said, it's not about being offended. It's more about being oppressed. And that word can be oppressive to some people. And I mean, I admitted, I was like, I had no idea. When I do use that word, I use it like satirically or, sarcastically, but, and she made a good point that like, well, you can still make your point and be humorous and all that and be sarcastic and stuff without using words that are harmful to some people. And so, I gave me something to think about and I agreed. I was like, okay, I guess it's not a big deal to offend people. That's more their problem if they're offended or, I mean, and I also said that, I mean, so I'm going to go a little left and right politics sounding here because that's just how it goes. Someone that lives in a very right state could be looked at as very liberal in that state, but then they move to like Portland and they still look like a conservative, right? So it's all very subjective, all this stuff. So
context,
and, I mean,
nuance.
Yeah. So I mean, we agreed on that stuff, and but she made a point that if it's oppressive, not offensive, and that it's just not needed, maybe in this podcast. So then I thanked her for educating me and stuff because I do try. I don't want to have people hurt or
you're not trying to deliberately hurt anyone.
Yeah, and I don't mind learning and whatever. So if it was ignorant of me, then I accept that, and I'll try to do better. I mean, I'll only go so far with some things, but that's fine. Yeah. That's a word that bothers people, and I mean, it bothers me too. That's why I used it satirically, because I was called that when I was a kid by people. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. A couple of things that come to mind. First, it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like this person actually came to you with good intentions, with good intent, and not to come at you and like try to cancel you or
Right.
lecture you. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like it
Yeah.
was a conversation. Like let me help you understand why this is oppressive to me or oppressive to women. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
She actually said, like, I wouldn't have brought this up with you if I didn't trust you well enough that we could have a discussion about it, kind of thing.
And I actually want to stop right there and say, well done for both of you, for this person reaching out to you, and for, like, I've got goosebumps. I'm not even kidding. For this person reaching
Ooh,
out
me
to you
too
and you
now.
being receptive to it. And here's why. Because if you look at the way that people operate now, we have a lot of culture shifts that we're doing. We have a lot of oppression that we're trying to overcome and change. And I think that's wonderful. But I think it's even better that you can have these conversations with people as opposed to canceling them, ending a friendship, ending a relationship, or whatever, just because you have a disagreement, especially if the intentions are good. And so if this person came to you screaming, yelling, ranting and raving, trying to get you canceled, writing comments, tagging you as, some misogynistic, I can't even say that, misogynistic asshole, then I would be like, fuck this person, right? Because if you don't have a good intention, I don't really care what you think. But
Hmm.
that being said, I also think that needs to work the other way. And I, like you, was often called the P word. And as a kid growing up, it's funny enough. I think in the UK they still use it because my friend in the UK used it when she was here a couple of years ago all the time. Called all me and my guy friends that. But that's neither here nor there. And I'm not saying that is right or wrong. But what I think is, like, my hot take on this is everything's nuanced. You have to do what this person did, right? If you're offended, if you're upset, if you're triggered, if you take the time to, like, recognize where a person's coming from, what their intentions are, and what their nuance is, I think that's a perfectly acceptable way to have engaged over this. Now, that being said, context is king. And I know sometimes I'll say things like, hey guys, when I start my podcast, and I try to say, hey everybody, or hey everyone, or something that's more neutral, because I do understand that, like, hey guys, it's something that is, a male first thing. It just is. And do I think most people are bothered by it? No. But if it's something that I can work on that doesn't really change anything, to fine. Like, I'm fine doing that. But, in the context of how it was used, and again, I don't remember exactly how it was used, but I kind of remember the context of the conversation. And I think that's important. Like, we were speaking satirically, we were speaking from experience, and that word, like, to you and me, has meaning to us too, as it was used to insult us. Now, that being said, that also maybe proves the point a little bit that, like, using a nickname for female genitalia as an insult can absolutely be misogynistic. So I guess from that perspective, like, I see that. However, that's where the context and the nuance comes in. Like, we're men, we were called that because we were sensitive or we were struggling or whatever that is. And so in our vernacular, in our life, in the way that we've been groomed, and not groomed, geez, cut that out. Can't say that. In the way
I'm
we
leaving it
were,
in.
yeah, fine, just leave it. And the way we were brought up, in the way, we were in our culture and stuff like that, there's going to be these nuances that we have, or these things that we say, or these things that we don't know, that are oppressive. And I've had them in my life too, where, I've had a privilege, or I haven't understood something and I've needed it explained to me. So what I think is important to take away from this, at least from my perspective, is the way that it was approached is the right way to approach it. If you have an issue with someone, or how they're speaking, or how they're using a word, or how they're talking to you, approach it the way this was done. Have an honest conversation, trust the person receiving the feedback, have an open mind. That doesn't mean you need to agree. I mean, that doesn't
Hmm.
mean you need to, 100% go in one way or another, but just be open to those conversations. And I think that's important. Now, lastly, I think that there's a lot of people that wouldn't have that tact and that would cancel you. right? Or try to cancel you or just get mad at you or put you on blast or whatever that is. And that's where I think we should take this anger that people have and when it's you and you're feeling that way and you're feeling someone used a word, behave like this person and try to have an honest conversation and understand that if you can understand that person's intentions, if that person's intentions weren't bad or ill-willed or meant to be oppressive or meant to be derogatory or meant to be racist in some cases, like give them some grace, because if the intention isn't there to do it, then you don't need to treat them like they're a bad person, because we all need to learn. We all need to learn from each other.
Yeah. And to be clear, she said like it's one thing if it's everyday conversation and you're around your buddies and you're being sarcastic, whatever, like use the word all you want. But like when it's on
that's
air,
worse though, because then you're like normalizing it and it's going to happen on air. It's going to happen. You see what I mean?
Maybe. Yeah, I do. I guess
like I don't want to use, if that's a word that women are saying is oppressive and they don't want me to use, there's going to be times I slip up because it's just part of my vocabulary, part of the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I'm doing it on purpose. And that doesn't mean I'm not trying not to do it, but I'm going to try not to use it in casual conversations with my buddies then either, because I don't want it to become a normal part of my vocabulary. You know what I mean?
Right. And as we're talking, I'm wondering about like people use the word dick all the time, and it basically sounds like you're an asshole. When you call someone a dick,
and we all have assholes. So are we all assholes?
Like, it's like, well, wait a minute. Are all men dicks? Is that the reference when you say dick? Yeah, it's all very complex.
Well, isn't a dick? Well, I guess a dick is slang for a penis. This is not where I expected it. Because a dick is a whale, isn't it? Like, isn't it a blue whale?
Oh, sure. I don't know.
So is it at like?
I don't know. But yeah. Shit. I was going to make another point. Oh, I said, I used to get really hyper. I was hypersensitive, I guess, around mental health words like, oh, you're crazy and stuff like that, because, I spent time in the psych ward and stuff. And I just kind of stopped because it was just, one, exhausting, and two, kind of like what you were saying. It's just, it's my problem. I don't know if it's an oppressive word saying someone's crazy.
I think it can be like there's my instinct when someone does or says something crazy is to be like, they're fucking crazy. Like I try not to do that. Or if I have gotten good at not just throwing that word around. Right. And actually, like, to be honest, that word, a lot of people called Danielle crazy on social media and in commentary when the show came out. And I really, really, well, first of all, I saw that how much it hurt her because she's not crazy. And then I felt like at the same time, I could see how that could be so hurtful when someone's being portrayed with, anxiety and then being called crazy and knowing that they have anxiety. And, she used to say all the time that she thought people would hate her for the way she looked or how much she weighed or whatever. And all of this stuff, she never thought it would be for her mental health. And I always felt like I can see how people throwing around that she's crazy can be upsetting. Because I know sometimes I feel crazy. And then you don't want that kind of negative reinforcement. So I understand it. But I also, also get that sometimes context is king and context is where it matters. And that's the same thing with like triggers. Like, this is a hot take. You want to talk about hot takes. And this is another one I threw out at my dinner last night was I'm all for giving people like trigger warnings. I think that's totally fine. Like I don't want to walk into someone's house and they're like, oh, guess what? We invited you over and we're binging Love is Blind season 2. Like, no, let me know that's what we're doing before you invite me over somewhere. You know what I mean? So like that show, like all of it, very triggering. But you know what? I also know that that's my responsibility to handle it, which is why when a new season comes out, I don't go on Netflix. When a new season comes out, I mute all of the news, like Us Weekly, Entertainment Tonight, all of that, because I know every headline's going to be there. It's why everyone from the show is muted. It's why, except Shane and Jeremy, but that's because they don't remind me of it. But
is it an oppressive feeling you get, or just you get? it stirs up an emotion.
All of it. I mean, that shows very oppressive. The way that I'm shadow banned right now, and I have 300,000 followers, and I can't even get a reel that gets seen by 1,000 people when I share it with a person who has 130,000. Like, or when my YouTube videos get 0 views, or when I gain 1 new subscriber a week, and I'm putting out content every day. Like, I'm oppressed, and it's because of that show and all the work. You know how hard I work on my show and this show and you know, my job and and all of this stuff. And so like when I'm hustling and I'm not getting ahead because I'm fighting the man, like it's very oppressive. So that show is very oppressive. It pisses me off. And at the same time, it gets me, you know, digging my feet in and being like, keep driving. So there's that. But with trigger warnings too, and this stuff, like people got to handle their own triggers. And that's the moral of my story there. Like you got to handle your own triggers. And this is separate than what we just talked about with the P word, but you got to handle your own triggers. Like you can't expect everyone else to walk on eggshells. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to trigger you. And same thing, if their intentions are not to trigger you, hurt you, or upset you, you've got to find it inside you to learn how to manage that, learn how to communicate, because there's plenty of times I know I've triggered people and that is not my intention. And it happens because we have different life experiences. So
I'm cringing a bit because this person mentioned the word triggered as well, because they had a loved one who died by gun violence, and how the word trigger can be
triggering. And I'm not kidding you, I've wondered that before. I actually think, yes, because I actually have thoughts since like, well, you know, we have a school shooting here. I mean, probably like 3 a day at this point. But I've always wondered, like, with that word, like, I didn't really understand since school shootings, really, like how that word's meaning and the way it's used actually came to be. Because I hear it and I think of shooting someone. And that is a very, like, again, not shooting God, this is such a nuanced conversation. Not shooting. But like, if I'm saying someone's triggered, it's like they've pulled the trigger. In my mind, they've pulled the trigger and shot it at someone. Like that would be like my natural way of thinking what that meant. Or the gun was triggered, like that someone pulled the trigger. And then the way that I think about that actually makes that if someone's triggered, it's like they're the victim of being shot. You know what I mean? So I've never understood that. Yeah, I've never understood that word being the word we use to describe people being upset or sent back to a place where something that was very upsetting to them. I've never like understood it. I of course have to accept it, because what am I going to do? Change the meaning and pop culture of what it means? But I actually completely understand that. I think there's validity in that, actually.
Yeah, I know it, and it is funny because when she brought it up, I was like, "Yeah, why the hell do we use that word?"
Right?
But again, there's like, and
I remember one time I was like, "What does that even mean?" The first times I started hearing it being said, I'm like, "What does that even mean?"
Yeah, it's kind of a newer thing. Like, right? Maybe 20 years ago, I don't know if that word was even used.
I would be like, "This reminds me of when my parents would spank me." Like, this reminds me of, like, it takes me back to, you know what I mean? It's Anyway,
but yeah, I did admit to her that, you know, I'm going to use words again that I just don't realize are, you know, maybe oppressive or offensive to people, but I'm open to feedback and to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know every word that's going to affect someone. So, you know, I warned her, like, I'm going to use words that are not going to be popular again, but if people give me feedback, I'll, you know, I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to change, and no big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, we had a really nice conversation about it. I think at first she was probably a little emotional when she wrote it, but, you know, we had a nice, good long talk about it. So,
I think that's the takeaway here, is that if you're upset with someone, try to understand the context and tension and have a reasonable conversation. And even if you
accept feedback.
Yeah, accept feedback. Even if you agree to disagree, that doesn't mean that this one thing needs to be the end of a friendship or a relationship. We're all different.
Yeah. I'm surprised we talked about this for this long. Maybe I'm not. Well, anyway, it's your turn.
I get triggered by triggered. So
I know me too. I mean, I could talk more about it, but basically that's what happened.
Yeah, it was an interesting one to chat about. So I've got a good one today, a little more light, let's just say. So this is an article that I found from North Carolina Health News. It is by Rose Hoban, or Hoban, Hoban. This was published the other day. And it is headlined, Planting the Seeds for a Care Farm to Help People with Mental Health Needs. Subheadline, psychiatrist Nora Dennis works to build a retreat where people with mental illness can nurture plants and animals while being nurtured by professionals. And what I think is so important about this, and why I chose this article for today, is because I die on this hill all the time. I post about it all the time how important being outside and walks are for my mental health. They help me clear my head. They help me start my day off. There's science behind getting nature and sunlight literally in your eyes to help regulate your circadian rhythm and your serotonin production and all of that stuff, managing your cortisol, all of that stuff. And so one of the things that has been so instrumental in me managing my mental health is spending time in nature and spending time outside, getting sunlight, engaging with a park or here a city street even, right? But getting that sunlight is so important. And so while this psychiatrist, Nora Dennis, is having building this retreat, she notated that doctors in Japan have been writing prescriptions for their patients to be able to take walks. So I think that's something that's pretty cool, right? If like we get to a place where doctors can say, hey, like your prescription is to go for 2 15-minute walks a day, and your job like has to let you do it. And that's a very, very basic example, but you get it. But she's 44 years old. She's been years and years training to be a psychiatrist, and she was climbing up in like corporate ladders and institutional medicine. And her inspiration was that after she was just working with patients and after patient, and she was realizing like some of the conventional things were not enough, or not really meeting the core needs of what people wanted to do. And she finally had the realization that, and I quote, people were desperate to go outside. They would spend days, sometimes 8 days, without seeing the sun, and other than through a window, and just be sitting under fluorescent lights. And so she had a dream in 2022 that this is what she wanted to do. She wanted to do a more integrated approach to treatment. And so learning that people are doing better outside, engaging with nature, animals, and that has been a real benefit that she's seen helping people with their mental health. So I think we all need to spend more time outside. We are extremely deficient in vitamin D as a society. Vitamin D is heavily linked to mental health and mental illness. So it's good to see. I always I'm all about an integrated approach. And I have my personal decisions that I make where, I want to take food, diet, and medicine when necessary. But I don't believe that you can cure everything with just medicine. I think there needs to be like integrated approaches, and there isn't going to there might be at some point with AI, but we're not going to get into that. But, I don't think there's one medicine that can cure everything. Like you can have it to maybe help you get outside if that's something you're struggling with, or
weed man.
Weed. Yeah, there's that too.
It's a plant, man. It'll cure all, man. That's what I used to think. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, that's okay. I'm happy to see psychiatrists who are trained in traditional pharma medicine kind of seeing like, hey, there's a bigger picture here, and we can put together these retreats, and we can prescribe nature and walks and engaging with animals and being outside. And I just love to see that.
She's just been bought out by big nature.
100%.
Instead of big pharma. Anyway.
And by the way, this episode is brought to you by Big Nature. We're encouraging you to get outside.
Rake a leaf. Yeah, man. It's I haven't been out as much as I have in the past, but yeah, I've had so many jobs where it's like I'm outside 8 hours a day, and
but that's like I've manual done like labor. That's not like embracing nature. It's a little different.
But I take that nature as part of the positive of the job. And a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
the
I see.
and a lot
All
of the
right.
manual labor is like planting trees or like market gardening and stuff like that. So it is rewarding. And another thing, I often garden barefoot because the negative ions
Yes.
from Earth get
Grounding.
grounded, all that stuff. I know it sounds hokey pokey, but it's
No,
so
it's
I love it.
I just had Noah Ione on my podcast this week. I don't know if I don't assume people listen to my podcast, but he was talking about the importance of grounding. He's kind of like this. He spent 15 years traveling the world to learn ancient medicine and ancient teaching and ancient wisdoms. And one of the big things is breathing and like grounding, bare feet on the ground outside in the dirt, in the mud.
So we were just talking before, and I'm moving from my nice small town to the city, and that's something I'm worried about is not being outside as much because it's going to be a smaller city, urban setting, and I have a beautiful garden in my home now and stuff. So I'm a little concerned about that, but I agree.
But you
it's
can.
very,
I'm
very
in the
helpful.
city, and I manage. We're lucky in Chicago that we have a lot of parks.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of trees.
We do have a beautiful park in the city I'm going to. So it's actually next to Central Park. It's the biggest park in an urban setting per capita on Earth. So
wow, that's awesome.
It's like this big sprawling park all throughout the city. So anyway, yeah, okay, you made me feel better. Okay, I'm not so worried about that now.
Yeah, you'll. It's more like, yeah, it's just different, but it's still, you get different stimulus.
I do live on the prairie though, and it's like I can walk for 5 minutes and just be like, it's kind of like being on the ocean, but it's land, and it's just like, it's so open, and so the city's
fresh
not
air.
going to be. City won't be like that as much, but there's other benefits. So whatever. Yeah, well, it's a good story. I like that one.
Yeah,
another good episode, everyone. If you don't agree, well, that's too bad.
Cancel us. No, I'm kidding.
If you have questions, concerns, feedback, stories you want us to look at, go to the show notes, reach out to us, let us know. We'd be happy to talk about it or at least consider it. So thank you to the young lady that sent her feedback to us, because it was good talking too about it. So until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Nick. Peace out. This has been our Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
We're so glad you came.
Remember, when you heal yourself,
you heal the world.
Be sure to like this video, leave comments, and suggest articles for future episodes.
Hit subscribe to Eyes Wide Open
and Bunny Hugs and Mental Health.